Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, Yemen's President Hadi has fled his palace in Aden as Houthi rebels advance towards that city. Sergeant Bergdahl, who went missing from his U.S. Army base in Afghanistan back in 2009, has been charged with desertion and misbehavior. We have an update on that major story tonight. And the GOP-controlled House in the past half hour has passed a budget for the first time. All those stories and more, plus Corey Heaven with more on that Germanwings air crash over the French Alps yesterday. Corey?
Yes, Jay, we are getting more details on yesterday's Germanwings crash, and it turns out several Americans were on board. The Auto Workers Union is tooting their horns, saying what some automakers are offering to workers is too low. Moms-to-be working for UPS are starting to get what I call a small victory in our lawsuits across America, and at the same time, a cookie at a grocery store is leading to a grieving families lawsuit also on the docket. And how can I put this politely? The night is changing for One Direction and Top Gear. That's all coming up in this edition of your conservative news source. The Evan Miller Report starts right now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Wednesday, March the 25th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller along with Corey Evan this evening.
It's a beautiful day here in LA, but if you're living in London, it's not so beautiful, as you will see toward the end of the hour.
Absolutely right. Also on tonight's program, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie joins the legal fight against Obama's immigration reform and trading favors why the GOP is helping Hillary Clinton. All those stories and more on tonight's Evan Miller Report. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off in Yemen tonight, where their president has fled his palace in Aden as Houthi rebels advance towards the city. Gunfire could be heard around the city center, and security forces allied to the Haas have taken over the international airport. The rebels have made rapid gains since seizing a key airbase only 37 miles away from Aden on Wednesday morning. Government officials deny reports that the president has fled the country and says he still remains in Aden. The U.S. State Department says it was in touch with President Hadi earlier in the day and said he is no longer at the compound, but could not confirm any additional details about his location. State television, which is controlled by the rebels, announced a reward of 20 million Yemeni rials, I will probably say this wrong, rivals, for anyone who captures the fugitive president. The Reuters news agency and ITN are reporting that Aden residents attempted to storm an army barracks to obtain weapons before being repulsed by troops. Yemeni Foreign Minister Rahid Yassin has called on Arab nations to stage an urgent military intervention in the country. However, sources in neighboring Saudi Arabia told Reuters and ITN there were no plans for military intervention in the crisis and that the buildup of military forces on its border with Yemen was only purely defensive. The U.S. has begun airstrikes against Daesh militants in the Iraqi city of Tikrit. The United States military has now confirmed the order followed a request from Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi for assistance after Iranian-backed ground offensive in the city stalled. These strikes are intended to destroy Daesh strongholds with precision, said U.S. Lieutenant General James Terry. Until now, Washington has had no involvement in the operation in Tikrit. General Terry, who is now commanding general of the U.S.-led Operation Inherent Resolve, said the strikes would minimize collateral damage to infrastructure. The Iraqi ground offensive also resumed on Wednesday, targeting Daesh positions. The renewed efforts would be supported by the coalition, according to a U.S. military statement. It said the aim was to dislodge Daesh from Tikrit, which is encircled by Iraqi forces once again, placing the town under the government of Iraq control. Now to a big story that has been big in our newsroom all day. Sergeant Bal Bergdahl, who went missing from his U.S. Army base in Afghanistan in 2009, has now been charged with desertion and misbehavior. A hearing will determine whether he will have a court-martial proceeding. He could then be sentenced up to life in prison if found guilty. Sergeant Bergdahl, of course, was freed back in May after 5 years of what was said to be captivity by the Taliban. His release, the product of a controversial prisoner swap by the Obama administration from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, sparked a heated political row within the U.S. Congress and the American people. The U.S. Army made the announcement at U.S. Army Forces Command in Fort Bragg, North Carolina today. Colonel Daniel King, head of the investigation, has said the U.S. Army Forces Command had reviewed the Army's investigation into Sergeant Bergdahl's disappearance before bringing the charges. Colonel King said Sergeant Bergdahl had been charged with 1 count of desertion with intent to shirk important or hazardous duty and 1 count of misbehavior before the enemy by endangering the safety of a command unit or place. I should say that's command, unit, or place, ladies and gentlemen, 3 separate words there. Sergeant Bergdahl could spend up to 5 years in prison if convicted on the desertion charge. A conviction on the misbehavior charge carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. The case will now go to a preliminary hearing to determine whether he should face a court-martial. Colonel King likened the hearing to a civilian grand jury proceeding. The timing for the hearing has not yet been announced. Fellow soldiers said Sergeant Bergdahl not only wandered away from his unit while deployed in Afghanistan back in June 2009. Stay with the Evan Miller Report on this developing story. We'll bring you updates as they become available on this story. And stay tuned to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. Also on Twitter at EM Radio Report. Over to Ukraine now, where 2 senior Ukrainian officials have been arrested during a cabinet meeting as part of an anti-corruption crackdown, hours after a powerful regional governor was sacked. The head of Ukraine's State Emergency Services, Sherty Boskovy, and his deputy, Veslo Stosky, were handcuffed by police at the televised meeting. They are suspected of involvement in high-level corruption. Earlier, Ukraine's president sacked the billionaire governor, Ihor Kowalski. Mr. Kowalski had been running the key industrial region of the Dnipropetrovsk and had financed armored volunteers to fight pro-Russian separatists in the east. He had been vying with President Petro Poroshenko for control of the Ukraimevka Energy Company. The 2 arrests, shown on TV on Wednesday, were connected to illegal kickbacks involving procurement contracts. Interior Minister Arsen Avak told the cabinet meeting. Prime Minister Arshiv Yaskov, quoted by Reuters and ITN news agency, said, "When the country is at war and when we are counting every penny, they steal from people and the state. This will happen to everyone who breaks the law and sneers at the Ukrainian state." Well, Corey Evan, I certainly wish this kind of stuff would actually happen in our government today and actually happen live on the House floor or the Senate floor, because there's some House members who have done certain things that have not been too keen. This would actually be a good improvement, I think, to have this happen on live TV. It would certainly bring corruption down among politicians here in the U.S. There's nothing like bad press for politicians.
Yes, I'd certainly like to see Dick Wad Durbin brought down or Harry Reid cut down.
Ooh.
Play on words, people.
Play on words. Corey Evans been working on that one all day. He enjoyed that one.
Absolutely.
Are we gonna send Barbara Boxer back home in a boxcar? That's the question.
Just put her in a cardboard box, ship her to California, and write "Do not bend" on it.
And the question is, ladies and gentlemen, where do we send her? to Governor Jerry Brown's house or Dianne Feinstein's summer residence?
I'd say just send her to Alcatraz, but then again, that's shut down.
Corey Evans has a cruel streak tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. When I get on one, I just keep it going, don't I?
We got to keep this show going, don't you know, because our TV career's in the dump. Isn't that right, Bill Cosby? Where's my friend Bill Cosby? Let's call him up. Bill, isn't that right?
Yes, with all the scandal he's involved in, his career's in the dump. NBC won't touch him anymore.
Absolutely right. All right, folks. I don't think I have Bill Cosby here, do I? Yes, I do have Bill Cosby.
Gotta keep
You
this show
should. We've
going,
been using
don't
it
you know?
since the
'Cause my
unless
TV
Bill
career
Cosby
is-
hacked in and deleted it.
Well, it's still there. All right, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, the little bit of mixed humor is because it is Wednesday night, and it's Sackheads Radio Night. So at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on SHR, tune into the Sackheads Radio Show right here on SHR Media. And I'm sure Sackhead Clint and Sackhead Sean will have jokes and humor better than Corey Evan and I can muster up for a 2-minute segment. But the jury is still out on that. All right, folks, back to the international news now. Ex-Liberian President Charles Taylor has been ordered to serve the rest of his jail term in the UK after losing a request to be transferred to Rwanda. He had argued that he was being detained his rights to a family life because his wife and children had not been granted UK visas. The judges rejected this argument, saying they had not properly applied. A UN-backed court convicted him of war crimes over his support for rebels who committed atrocities in Sierra Leone. Over to Myanmar now, where 65 people have appeared in court in Myanmar to be charged over a student protest that ended in violence. The group, a mix of students and activists, were arrested while taking part in a protest 2 weeks ago against a new education bill in the country. They face possible jail terms on charges including insulting civil servants and refusing to disperse. Video of the protest showing people being cornered by the police and beating sparked international condemnation. The president of Myanmar, President Thein Sein, formerly Burma, has defended the action of officers, telling the BBC that in many Western countries a similar situation might have ended in gunfire and death, making references to the likes of Ferguson and New York. All right, folks, moving over to a story out of Africa, where Boko Haram is using an unknown number of civilians as human shields as its fighters flee an offensive by multinational forces. This coming from a top Nigerian official today. Mike Oronini, the Director General of the National Orientation Army, will not say how many people are being used. Some say 500, some say 400, some say 300. But Omori said he was awaiting reports from authorities on the ground around Damascus, a trading town near the border with Nigeria that was recaptured on March the 16th. Omori stressed this was not a new incident and that the authorities are investigating. Instead, he said that as troops advanced, Boko Haram rushed to a school where people had been held after the insurgents had seized the town late last year. They then released some women and children, but not those they had married in the period of the occupation. He said the fighters and those being used as shields are still in the Damascus area. And speak of Nigeria, Corey Evan has more on Nigeria's elections and why Nigeria has their borders closed in regards to this election. Apparently they don't want the United Nudists coming in and spying on their elections, huh, Cor?
Absolutely. The Christian Science Monitor brings me this one, I think, as always. With Saturday's presidential election in Nigeria looming, armored vehicles and rifle-toting police have surrounded the offices of the Electoral Commission in a Lagos suburb, while police checkpoints are multiplying along Ikorodu Road, the bustling city's main thoroughfare. With fears of election-related violence running high, the government has taken what it describes as extensive precaution to ensure security across the country on election day. But it is unlikely that polling will take place in most of the northeast, Boko Haram stronghold, in the absence of functioning government institutions, and many worry that government security forces may not be able to keep a lid on the violence despite weeks of preparation. Chris Nguado, a Nigerian political analyst, says a lack of resources and manpower is largely to blame. Even so, he says that he's not sure, quote, that we have done all we can do or that we are prepared as we can be. For its part, the police force has announced a nationwide traffic ban, with an exemption for emergency vehicles, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on voting day. It's also promised to ensure watertight security around key and vulnerable points, but it's not watertight if the top does let in water, but at any rate, including refugee camps, newsrooms, government offices, and hospitals, according to a statement. In February, President Goodluck Jonathan cited the growing threat of Boko Haram in his push to postpone the election for 6 weeks. While the military claims to have made significant ground against the Islamist militant group since then, it still poses a serious threat. On Wednesday, a military spokesman told the AP that several hundred people were abducted by Boko Haram fighters as they retreated from a northeastern town earlier this month. But violence of a different kind has emerged. There have been dozens of politically motivated murders amid the increasingly incendiary campaigns run by the two main parties. Tensions escalated after the Electoral Commission decided to postpone the election to give the government of the ruling People's Democratic Party more time to focus on defeating Boko Haram. But the All Progressives Congress, the main opposition party, has accused the president of using the counterinsurgency campaign in the Northeast as an excuse to slow the momentum of APC candidate General Muhammadu Buhari, who it argues was on his way to victory. Stay with us. We will keep an eye on the Nigeria elections and bring you the latest as it becomes available. Moving on to a story from the BBC, an update on the Germanwings plane crash. 3 Americans died in the Alps air crash that killed 150 people, the U.S. State Department has confirmed. 2 of the victims have been named as Yvonne Selk and her adult daughter, Emily Selk. A third person was not being identified until their family was notified, the State Department said. The Airbus A320 crashed yesterday after an 8-minute rapid descent. There were no survivors. An early analysis of one flight recorder has not shed light into the cause of the crash. The German, French, and Spanish leaders have arrived together in the French Alps to visit the scene today. After arriving near the crash site, President Hollande, Chancellor Merkel, and Prime Minister Rajoy thanked the rescue workers for their efforts in difficult circumstances. Earlier, the black box cockpit voice recorder was recovered by a helicopter team at the site near Digne. French investigators say usable data has been extracted from the device, but it has so far yielded no clues as to the cause of the plane's crash. Remy Jauty, the director of the French Aviation Investigative Agency, said there were sounds and voices on the cockpit voice recorder, but that it was too early to draw any conclusions. He said controllers observed the plane beginning to descend and tried to get back in contact with the pilots without success. The second black box, the flight data recorder, has not yet been found. The older Mrs. Selk was employed by Booz Allen Hamilton as a contractor with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, the Pentagon Satellite Mapping Office. Drexel University said in a statement that Emily Selk graduated with honors in 2013 and was a music industry major. Her sorority, Gamma Sigma Sigma, said in a statement on its Facebook page it was mourning the loss of Selk, who, quote, always put others before herself and cared deeply for all those in her life. Footage shot from a helicopter on Tuesday showed plane parts scattered on the Rocky Mountainside. Germanwings chief executive Thomas Winkelmann said 72 Germans were amongst the dead, although the list was being constantly updated. Spanish government has raised the number of known Spanish victims in the crash from 49 to at least 51. Additionally, UK Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond confirmed that 3 Britons were on board. The flight was also carrying citizens of Australia, Japan, Colombia, Turkey, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Stay with us, and we will give you updates as soon as we hear anything about what may have caused this crash. We will let you know. And moving on to Brazil. I've got one more from Brazil before I go. Jay got ahead of himself there. But next stop is downstream. Heavy rains and flooding in northern Brazil have taken their toll, according to Huffington Post, on infrastructure in the state of Para, as terrifyingly illustrated by Reuters video of a bus falling through a sinkhole in a bridge on Monday. After dropping into the hole, the bus was carried away by the turbulent river below. The Washington Post says a tour group aboard the bus evacuated to the doomed vehicle prior to its untimely plunge, and no one was hurt in the accident. Video of the accident shows passengers calmly disembarking after the rear wheel of the bus fell through the dirt bridge, trapping the vehicle in place. Eventually, the land erodes away, and the tour bus teeters into the water, then rapidly floats downstream. The bus was on a highway near the cities of Itaituba and Rurápolis in the Brazilian state of Para, adds the International Business Times, which corroborates a report from Globo, TV Globo that is, stating the incident occurred on the Trans-Amazonian Highway. March is Yes, I did indeed see the TV Globo note on there. Yes, I hear it in my ear, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we have a private channel communicating to each other. But at any rate, March is historically one of Brazil's wettest months through southeastern parts of the country. But they've recently seen prolonged and heavy drought, so this is an unpleasant surprise for them, I'm sure.
It certainly is, Corey, but considering all that rain at once, gotta be careful. That's when mudslides are coming.
Exactly. And speaking of mudslides, we're seeing some mudslinging in the courtrooms in the U.S. news. New surveillance photos have been released of Tamerlan Tsarnaev less than 24 hours before the Boston Marathon bombings. This according to NECN.com. FBI Special Agent Christian Firabend testified the photos show Tamerlan Tsarnaev at a Target store in Watertown, Massachusetts, carrying out a shopping bag containing a purchase of 2 backpacks matching the brands on of the backpacks found at both explosion sites on Boylston Street. Agent Firabend also testified the bombers used Fagor Elite pressure cookers sold exclusively at Macy's on both Boylston Street and in the Watertown firefight. He said investigators were able to determine only 3 of the 4-quart Fagor Elite pressure cookers were purchased with cash in Massachusetts, and he was able to use the Tsarnaev's GPS device to put them at the Square One Mall in Saugus when one of those 4-quart pressure cookers was purchased. Their 6-quart pressure cooker. Jurors also saw the more than 100 pieces of evidence seized from the Tsarnaev family home at 410 Norfolk Street in Cambridge. That evidence included a black flag with foreign writing on it hung in a bedroom identified as Zokar's. Also in that bedroom were gun lubrication, a gun cleaning brush and cloth, BB gun targets, Gorilla Glue, and a caulking gun. In the kitchen of a 3rd-floor apartment, jurors saw a drawer full of a number of tools, along with hobby fuse, the top of a pressure cooker lid, and a pressure cooker gasket. Here at the Evan Miller Report, we are continuing to keep an eye on the What's this coming over my line? Oh dear, I'm hearing of a big-time earthquake in Illinois, you say, Jay? I'm just getting this over the line. That's what I'm receiving.
Yes, that's right. 2.9 magnitude earthquake that struck in the lake, in the Crystal Lake area of Chicago. Why don't you go and tell the audience what the latest is on that?
Right. 2.9, not such a big deal in California, where we're pretty much used to those, but this is a pretty big deal for the folks in Illinois. This earthquake hit the northwest suburban town of Lake town of Lake Hills, Illinois, today, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. USGS geophysicist Jana Persley confirmed to WGN that the event was an earthquake with its epicenter near Lake in the Hills. Several people in the region called WGN earlier Wednesday to report feeling their houses shaking. More details will come up as soon as they become available. That's all I've got for the moment on that one, Jay. Yes, and on that note, we will go ahead and move on to our next one from Reuters. North Carolina State University said today it has disbanded a fraternity and would review all fraternity and sorority activities at the school after the discovery of a pledge book filled with racially and sexually charged comments. Ugh. The disciplinary move resulted from an investigation into the university's chapter of Pi Kappa Phi after last week's discovery of the book, which included handwritten references to rape and lynching. Ugh, again. University Chancellor Randy Woodson said the National Fraternity also revoked the chapter's charter and its members would move out of their on-campus will be eligible to return to campus in 2018. said. The incident at the university in Raleigh is one in a string of recent reports of bad behavior, including racism, vandalism, and hazing by fraternities at U.S. colleges that have resulted in groups being suspended or closed permanently. Woodson said the university would review its fraternities, known as the Greek system, to determine whether they were conducting them. Last week, the school's Interfraternity Council halted social events involving alcohol for 24 fraternities after the pledge book's discovery. Rightly so on that. Any fraternity that acts as bad as they have been, they rightly deserve it. And finally, before I send it to break, Jay, I've got one about elephants rescuing someone from a lorry, and this one coming to us from the BBC. A pair of elephants has helped prevent a lorry from overturning in the U.S. state of Louisiana. When authorities responded to an emergency call about an 18-wheel vehicle stuck in a muddy lay-by, they found the elephants hard at work. The Natchitoches Parish Sheriff's Office said the truck had been hauling 3 elephants from New Orleans to Dallas when it got into trouble. Officials were astounded by what they saw, a spokesman said. The truck became stuck when it pulled off the highway and onto a lay-by near Powhatan, Louisiana, shortly after 7 a.m. local time yesterday. As the truck began to lean towards a ditch, the owner led 2 of the elephants out of the trailer and corralled them into preventing the truck from falling further. Natchitoches Parish Sheriff's Office Captain Tony Moore ABC that his colleagues had presumed the story would only be of local interest, but was surprised by the wider interest. So, congratulations there, Mr. Moran. It's caught our attention, at least. Recent rains have caused the ground surrounding the highway to become soft, the sheriff's office said. Eventually, a tow truck pulled the lorry to safety, and the elephants were able to rest. It's not clear who owns the elephants or the truck, but it is worth noting because elephants are pretty smart animals, and in this case, they prove to be very helpful animals, not just very entertaining.
Absolutely. We all know elephants known to be in the circus, but Corey Evan, we can certainly see elephants helping out a run-by lorry today. That's certainly some good news.
Certainly saved them from a run-by fruiting.
Ooh, bringing back that old joke. Ooh.
Yes.
The humor
Yes,
continues.
He is a fan of Mrs. Doubtfire. Rest in peace, Mr. Williams.
Yes. And as we said, Sackheads Radio, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific time tonight here. And that's why.
Too bad we're not back to back. Otherwise, I'd call it a good lead-in. But at any rate, I think we better take a break. When we come back, Australia looks to join a Chinese banking firm. Man, they love their danger down under. And it's bad postal worker deals, bad cookies, and bad drivers in lawsuits across America. And whether you're a gearhead or a One Direction fan, your probs to press today, and I'm sorry, but the Entertainment Report may not. But others do need to know about this because a lot of folks have kids. So, how's the DC news looking, Jay?
Well, not as bad as those poor cherubs, Cor. The GOP-controlled House passes a budget today. We'll tell you the details of that budget. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has joined a legal fight against President Obama's immigration reform plan, or as we like to call here at the Evan Miller Report, amnesty. Also tonight, Republicans asked the White House about former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's broken charity donors promise. And on tonight's program, the Democrats have yet to realize why they're in a free fall. We'll tell you why that an upcoming election might be the downfall of the Democratic Party. All those stories and more when we return on the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source, on this Wednesday, March the 25th. We'll be right back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, our discoveries have helped drive the childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to 80%. And we share our research all across America.
I'm 80% sure I'll spoil my kids. I'm 80% sure I'll break boys' hearts. I'm 80% sure we're chick magnets.
80%? I'll take those odds.
Give thanks for the healthy kids in your life and give to those who are not. Go to stjude.org or shop wherever you see the St. Jude logo.
Thank goodness that's over. The Wall Street stock market numbers aren't looking good in our business report. I'm Corey Evan. Jason Miller will be back in just a few moments with the DC news. The Dow lost 292 big ones at 17,718. The Nasdaq 118 points down at 4876, and the S&P 500 minus 30 equals 2061. Man, that was a nasty day. Oil advanced to a 2-week high as the shrinking size of U.S. crude production gains and a falling dollar outweighed rising supply. U.S. crude production rose 3,000 barrels a day to 9.42 million in the 7 days ended March 20th, the Energy Information Administration said. The smallest increase since January left at the highest level in more than 3 decades. Prices retreated initially as the report showed that crude supplies increased 8.17 million barrels to 466.7 million last week, the most in records compiled since August 1982. U.S. oil explorers sidelined 41 drilling rigs last week, the smallest drop in 3 weeks and down from the average 59 rig weekly decline from February, according to data from Baker Hughes. The dollar dropped for the 6th time in 8 days against the euro, bolstering raw materials denominated in the U.S. currency. And next up from Yachu, the UAW is absolutely livid right now. The leader of the United Auto Workers Union has rejected a new level.
What's the crying for? That's all I hear from these damn unions.
Yeah, I know. He's
more.
rejected a new level of lower wages, Jay, for members who make auto parts ahead of contract talks with automakers that start in the summer. There have been reports that General Motors and Ford may propose a new pay level that is lower than the two existing groups. Speaking Wednesday at the union's National Bargaining Convention in Detroit, which sets the agenda for the union's bargaining efforts with the auto companies and other industries, President Dennis Williams said the UAW already has too many tiers of lower wages. Williams is under pressure from union members to end a second level of wages that starts around $15 an hour, about half the $28 per hour made by long-time workers. His rejection of a lower pay level comes at the current contract between Fiat Chrysler, GM, Ford, and the UAW, which represents about 137,000 workers at the three companies, expires in September. This year's contract talks are the first to come after the auto industry fully recovered from the recession and could be contentious as the union seeks a slice of the industry's billions of dollars in profits. Auto sales are expected to hit nearly 17 million in the U.S. this year, close to historic highs. They fell as low as 10.4 million in 2009. In a speech, Williams said workers shared in getting the auto companies through bad times and, quote, "We must equally share in the good times." Many at the convention spoke in favor of pay raises for veteran workers and of ending the second tier. Longtime UAW workers have not had an hourly pay raise since 2007, although they have received heavy annual profit sharing checks, but there's no guarantee of getting checks this year. Pay raises are expected this year, and Williams said it would be hard to bridge the gap between the two tiers if both get raises. And, of course, Jay, I will keep an eye on this one, and I will bring you any updates that come up as they become available. And before I get into the story, Australia said to the BBC it's prepared to join a new China-led infrastructure bank should certain conditions be met. Prime Minister Tony Abbott said the country had been talking to China about how the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank would be governed. He added that a decision will be made in the next few days. The next few days, that I think is just a sign that they are looking to, cover up something in there. They're looking to make it look like it's all a legal deal, but most certainly there's probably something in there that we should be weary about. Any rate, Heinz Company and Kraft Foods said their merger will create a new company co-headquartered in Pittsburgh and the Chicago area. That fuzzy concept will leave people in both places nervous.
Blown in from Pittsburgh.
Yes. Anyway, in Pittsburgh, where the Heinz name is stamped on a music hall, a history museum, a college, a chapel, and the Steelers football stadium, the ketchup company has been shrinking its local employment for decades, Jay. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly where those two go with this thing.
The market's
but of course, in this day and age,
today.
No, they definitely wanted more ketchup on their burgers after a very bad morning trading session, I guess.
Indeed.
Right, that's what I've got for business news right now. I will keep an eye on the merger and let you know how the thing plays out. And it's apparently was put together in just 10 weeks, so I'm sure that the next 10 weeks are going to be ironing out the rough details.
Ruffian did the details out. Thank you very much, Corey. Corey Evan with the business news. Corey Evan will be back a couple minutes with tonight's Global Socialism tonight. All right, folks, time for the D.C. news now. And we start off with the GOP-controlled House, which is normally quarrelsome. The House Republicans finally came together tonight and passed a boldly conservative budget that relies on nearly $5 trillion in cuts to eliminate deficits over the next decade, and calls for repealing President Obama's health care law, or as we just like to call it for what it is, Obamacare, and envisions transformations of the tax code and Medicare welfare system. Final passage was 228 to 199, which came shortly after Republicans bumped up recommended defense spending to levels proposed by President Obama. Much of the budget savings would come from Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare programs that aid the low income, although details were sketchy, according to some. Representative and Republican from Georgia, Tom Price, chairman of the House Budget Committee, called the plan a balanced budget for a stronger America and one that will get the economy rolling again. Meanwhile, Democrats rebutted that the GOP numbers didn't add up and called their policies wrong-headed. Well, considering, ladies and gentlemen, that the Democrats could only pass one, maybe two budgets in the whole time they've been in office, when President Obama has been in for the past almost going on 8 years, I consider this good news on the GOP side. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have to wait for it to pass the Senate. The Republican-controlled Senate, as I said, is likely to approve its version of a budget by week's end. The plans themselves are non-binding and do not require a presidential signature. Instead, once the House and Senate agree on a common approach, lawmakers will have to draft legislation to carry out the program that Republicans have vowed to follow in wake of campaign victories last fall. Still, the House passage of a budget marked a significant victory for Speaker and BS artist John Boehner and the GOP leadership, which have struggled to overcome differences with the fractious rank and file. An equally notable second triumph appeared on the horizon. Legislation to stabilize the system of payments to doctors to treat Medicare patients, as I mentioned Medicare earlier, is expected to clear the House Thursday, and Obama's declaration of support enhanced its chances in the Senate. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's good news there. At least we're going to get a budget passed for this fiscal year. Sounds like some good news, at least on that part, Corey Evan.
Yeah, about time. I bet you it's going to be drawn out so far that it'll hardly be worth it in the end, though.
Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed when it comes to that. And of course, the Sackheads radio show will be breaking down that budget tonight at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here on the SHR Media Network. Over to some more political news now. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who has repeatedly refused to outline his position on the nation's immigration system, has now quietly, not so quiet if it ends up on the Evan Miller Report, sir, signed on into an innocuous brief opposing President Obama's executive actions on immigration. The brief was filed on Monday by New Jersey, Texas, Louisiana, and South Dakota, and urges an appeals court to uphold a preliminary injunction blocking action that could spare millions of illegals who are in the country illegally from deportation. The states involved say moving forward with the programs will cause them irreparable injuries. The question presented is whether the president can unilaterally legalize the presence of millions of people and unilaterally give them myriad legal benefits, including work permits, Medicare, Social Security credits, and tax credits, they wrote in the brief. The brief continued to say Washington's attempt to turn this into a policy debate only underscores the dearth of legal arguments to support defendants' unilateral efforts to hand out government benefits in the violation of federal law. Christie, who is weighing a run for president, has been generally critical of President Obama's immigration policies, but has refused to answer questions about how he would approach the issue. His office did not publicize the brief. A spokesman confirmed New Jersey had signed on, but declined to comment today. Other political news today. The Republican Party chairman has now asked President Obama's administration today to disclose when it first learned that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's pledge to disclose all donors to her family's charities had been repeatedly violated. Clinton, the front-runner to become the 2016 Democratic nominee for president, signed on to the transparency agreement with Obama incoming administration back in 2008 before becoming Secretary of State. Reince Priebus, the Republican National Committee chairman and BS artist, appealed to the White House today after the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Health Access Initiative officials confirmed to Reuters and ITN last week that no complete list of donors have been published since early 2010, a year into Clinton's 4-year tenure at the State Department. And here's a story that the GOP wouldn't normally put up on its docket, but I think today would be a good day to do it. Improbable as it may sound, House Republicans are on the verge of approving, without much fanfare, a major priority of Hillary Clinton's. When Clinton ran for president back in 2008, she touted her role as First Lady in designing and championing the Children's Health Insurance Program, also known as CHIP, which provided coverage for millions of children whose parents did not qualify for Medicaid but could not afford private insurance. At the time President Clinton signed the law in 1997, it constituted the largest expansion of government-funded children's health insurance since the enactment of Medicaid in 1965. First Lady Hillary Clinton On Tuesday, Republicans unveiled legislation that would extend Hillary Clinton's CHIP program for another 2 years without spending cuts or changes of any kind. The program's funding is due to expire at the end of September, making this an unusual case of Congress moving to act as well as in advance of a deadline. You won't hear much about the CHIP extension from Republicans, however. They are supporting it to gain Democratic backing for one of John Boehner's top goals, a package that permanently prevents steep cuts in Medicare payments to doctors and institutes a few long-sought reforms in the entitlement program. The so-called Doc Fix is an annual headache for both parties, and repealing it for good has commanded most of the attention inside the Beltway. Yet extending funding for children's health insurance is equivalently significant, and its inclusion in the bill represents a rare bipartisan breakthrough to some. But ladies and gentlemen, as Corey Evan made further mention earlier, further proves what kind of horse trading and pig slop is being traded in D.C. these days to get a budget passed. And we're just finding out, making bad deals just to get a Medicare reform passed. That's not exactly a good deal, ladies and gentlemen. And finally, the Democrats have yet to realize they are in a freefall, dragged down by the anchor that is the unsuccessful reign of Barack Obama, despite evidence to the contrary from all across the country, where the president's party and its allies continue to suffer unexpected electoral defeats and are frequently on the losing end of battles to reverse policies in place since Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. The latest example comes from Pennsylvania. This coming from the U.S. News and World Report today. The example comes from a 26-year-old financial advisor, Martha White, who posted an upset victory in a special election for a seat in the state House of Representatives. GOP voters in the district are outnumbered by Democrats 2-1, and Obama carried it back in 2012 with the 57% of the vote. White knocked out nearly 6,000 donors on her way to victory in this Northeast Philadelphia district, proving once again that when it comes to boots on the ground and grassroots campaigning, there is no substitute, especially at the local level. Her decision to focus on taxes, she said, repeatedly she said to fight to keep property taxes in check, while a member of the state legislature and education funding were an important part of her formula for victory. Now, it's always a mistake to draw too many conclusions from the outcome of a single election, especially one for a seat in a state legislature, but Pennsylvania's 170th House district is a Democratic county. Obama County, Clinton County, and no Republican should ever be expected to win there. That one is reason enough for people to sit up and take notice that the internal divisions among progressive Democrats, or as we call him here on the program, communists, who back the current president, and more traditional party hacks who tend to back folks like the president and his wife, are not figments of the GOP imagination. They are real and they matter. To read the full report from the U.S. and World Report, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for a segment that we like to call on the program, Core.
It's time for our continuing battle against global socialism.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Corey. A closely divided U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday threw out a vote ruling that upheld the state legislative redistricting plan in Alabama that would impact black voters into certain districts in the way critics say diminish their clout at the polls. In a 5-4 decision, the justices called the lower ruling backing the redistricting plan legally erroneous, but justices ducked a ruling on the plan's lawfulness and sent the case back down to a lower court. The court avoided deciding whether the redistricting plan proposed by Republican-controlled state legislature in 2012 violates the U.S. Constitution's guarantee of equal protection under the law by concentrating black voters who tend to vote Democratic into a small number of districts. The vote was divided on ideological lines, with conservative swing vote Justice Anthony Kennedy joining its 4 liberals in the majority. And finally, before I send it over to Corey Evan to wrap up tonight's Global Socialism segment, lawmakers on Wednesday passed a resolution in New Hampshire encouraging student participation in state government. This after legislators were being lampooned nationally for mocking what started as a civics lesson for 4th graders. You might remember this story as we brought it up earlier in the week. The action in New Hampshire House of Representatives follows the much criticized and publicized debate over the students' effort to name the red-tailed hawk the official state raptor. As the students from Lincoln Ackerman School watched from the House gallery back on March the 12th, one lawmaker invoked abortion, and others called the students' effort a waste of time. One suggested the state would next be naming an official state hot dog. The House then defeated the kids' bill. All right, that's all from me on Global Socialism. Now send it over to Corey Evan to wrap up tonight's Global Socialism.
And I had two, but I'll just do one since we're short on time. California Attorney General Kamala Harris said today she's seeking judicial authority to refuse to allow the author of an utterly reprehensible, quote-unquote, anti-gay proposed ballot initiative to gather signatures to place it on the ballot. The proposed initiative, called by its author the Sodomite Suppression Act, calls gay sex an abominable crime for which participants should be killed. Oh, dear. The proposal is so patently extreme that it could never become law, but it has nonetheless upset people in California who have urged Harris to stop in. Typically, when the author of a ballot proposition files a measure and pays a fee of $200, the next step is for the Attorney General to prepare a title and summary, which would then be used to show voters and as backers gather signatures to try and place it on the ballot. The author of the measure, listed in the application documents as Matt McLaughlin of Huntington Beach, could not immediately be reached for comment on Wednesday. But, Mr. McLaughlin, don't you think that's a little extreme? I mean, this is a state that allows gay marriage, so it kind of shoots itself in the foot. Exactly.
Defeats the purpose indeed, Corey. Defeats the purpose indeed.
Yes.
All right, that does it on tonight's Global Socialism. But first, before we send it to lawsuits, here's Corey Evans' little catchphrase.
So, why must we keep hearing about gay marriage being a so-called right? Why do we let politicians change how we vote for their rubbish? And why hasn't anyone called about that coffee table I'm selling? Stay tuned for developments in our continuing battle against global socialism.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evan.
All right, Corey Evan is here with tonight's lawsuits across America. And Corey, you have a woman filing discrimination with the USPS. And Corey, I have to ask, is she with the Postal Workers Union? What beef does she have with us? And is she going to get a shotgun out and start shooting things up?
I wouldn't be surprised, but the AP says the Supreme Court gave a former UPS driver another chance today to prove her claim of discrimination after the company didn't offer her lighter duty when she was pregnant. The justices today sided 6-3 with former driver Peggy Young in throwing out lower court rulings that rejected her lawsuit. The case concerned employers' responsibilities under the 37-year-old Pregnancy Discrimination Act. Atlanta-based UPS maintained that it obeyed the law because it provided light work duty only in limited situations and did not single out pregnant women. But in ordering lower courts to look again at Young's claim, Justice Stephen Breyer said that for the court that one consideration should be, quote, why, when the employer accommodated so many, could it not accommodate pregnant women as well, unquote. UPS said it didn't provide light-duty work to any employees unless they were injured on the job, had a condition that was covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, or lost their federal certificate to drive a commercial vehicle. Well, don't you think, UPS, that pregnant women should be accommodated because, well, anything too strenuous could kill the baby, or worse, the young lady who's about to be a mother? Good golly. But here's something else that could kill a kid. Apparently, a cookie. This coming to me from UT San Diego, the San Diego Union Tribune, that is, from the AP. The family of an 11-year-old boy is suing the Publix grocery chain out of Tennessee, saying the child was allergic to nuts and died from a severe reaction after eating a cookie despite a worker's assurance it was safe. The lawsuit says Derek Landon Wood of Alabama died in June 2014 shortly after eating a chocolate chip cookie purchased at a Publix store in Clarksville. The boy, who was visiting family in Tennessee, was allergic to tree nuts. The lawsuit, which was filed on March 20th, says the store bakery did not post warnings about ingredients or possible cross-contamination, and the mother bought the cookie only after a worker assured her that it was safe. A Publix spokeswoman declined to on the litigation, but said in an email that the company posts allergen information at its bakeries. So there should be a nice clear sign that says, warning, products made here may contain traces of peanuts or tree nuts. So if that's the case, then Publix, good luck to you in court. And on that note, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed. And we got to get to entertainment very quickly. I've got two quick little stories for you. Zayn Malik of One Direction is calling it quits, ladies and gentlemen. Particularly the ladies. Yeah, and he says that's because he wanted to live a normal life, and he apologized to fans of the hugely popular British-Irish group for doing so. The decision by Malik to quit came after he dropped out of an Asian tour due to what he said was stress when pictures of the singer, who was engaged to Perry Edwards of Little Mix, were published showing him partying with another woman in Thailand. So what? Boys party with girls all the time. It doesn't mean anything unless they start dirty dancing, but that's, of course, another story for another day.
For another day. Leave it to the sackheads.
That's what I was trying to say. And Jeremy Clarkson's contract will not be renewed after an unprovoked physical attack on the Top Gear producer, BBC's general has confirmed. Also said he had not recognized the divided opinion. He asked a line across occasion. He was suspended on March 10th, Clarkson was, following what was called a fracas with Top Gear producer Oystein Timon, which turned out to be because no hot food was provided following a day's filming. Well, Mr. Clarkson, that's when you should have pulled out your old mobile and just dialed Domino's. Oh, wait, that's right, you don't like American. Oh, well, you just go for a curry. That's what you do. You don't punch out Mr. Producer Head just because he didn't have any hot food ready. Maybe it was late being delivered, you know?
Wrap it.
And that's what I got for you in entertainment. Hope to entertain you again tomorrow. Jay, take it away.
Thank you very much, Corey. And that is the Evan Miller Report for this Wednesday, March the 25th, 2015. Coming up next, after the weather with Helen Wickets from the BBC Med Office, is the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClellan, followed by the Sackheads Radio Show. And after that, news and commentary with Dan Butcher, part of a real busy Wednesday night here on the old SHR Media Network. For Corey Evan and all of us here at SHR, we wish you a great night. Here's Helen Wickets now with the weather.
Wintry weather in the northeast, deep area of low pressure with strong winds, snow and freezing rain. I want to draw your attention to this. Warnings out for severe storms for the evening and overnight into Thursday. But anywhere from Dallas to St. Louis, so affecting the Ozark Plateau, the southern and central plains, and making their way towards D.C. and Washington, D.C. and Florida for Thursday. Now, they could produce not just large and damaging hail, gusty winds, but some tornadic activity as well. So Thursday is looking a little bit dry behind, but we start to pick up the cold air behind this weather system as well. We're going to see temperatures drop away, actually. Not in the west. Temperatures, as you can see in Vancouver, with yet more rain coming in. 59, that's 15, as you saw, Celsius there. And further south, it's lovely and warm, 28, 79 there, as you can see, in Fahrenheit. So lots of fine dry weather across the west and warmth, but behind our weather system in the northeast, temperature's going to fall away. So 14 is 57 in New York for Thursday. Lots of wet weather around, still that threat of snow in the north, but some really intense showers around. But then temperatures behind this weather system will start to fall away. So a wet day with some thunderstorms around, but look at the temperature drop in New York Friday and Saturday. 14 right the way down to 8 and then 4. Some heavy showers around in Miami. Further west, well, it stays warm. Temperatures just a little down in LA by Saturday because of more cloud, really. Bye-bye.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.